Dr. Sarah Chin pinched the bridge of her nose as she watched her intern, Tommy Martinez, navigate the ancient ruins with all the grace of a drunken giraffe. The site had remained undisturbed for over 50,000 years, right up until the Galactic Archaeological Council had assigned her the most accident-prone intern in human history. "Tommy, please just stand still," she called out, trying to keep the exhaustion from her voice. "These ruins survived the collapse of an entire civilization. I'd rather they didn't meet their end because you had too much coffee this morning." The lanky intern gave her a sheepish grin, adjusting his environmental suit's helmet. "Sorry, Dr. Chen. It's just that these markings are incredible. Look at how they seem to shift when you—" His gesture of excitement sent him stumbling backward into a wall panel that had definitely not been designed to support the weight of a flailing human. Sarah's heart stopped. 50,000 years of perfectly preserved history, and she was about to watch it crumble because her intern couldn't keep his feet under him. She lunged forward, knowing she'd never reach him in time. But instead of catastrophe, there was a soft hum. The wall panel Tommy had collapsed against didn't break. It sank inward with a precision that spoke of engineering far beyond their current understanding. Lines of light, dormant for millennia, began tracing patterns across the chamber surfaces. "Nobody move," Sarah ordered, her scientific training kicking in as she activated her suit's recording systems. The predecessors' ruins were legendary for their preservation, but active systems were almost unheard of. Most sites had been stripped of power sources long ago. The floor shifted beneath them, segments realigning with a fluid grace that made modern technology look clumsy by comparison. A circular platform rose from the center of the chamber, bringing with it something that made both humans forget to breathe. The armor stood roughly 2 meters tall, its surface a deep obsidian that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. Unlike the bulky environmental suits they wore, its form was elegantly minimal, every curve and plane suggesting a purpose they couldn't begin to comprehend. It hung suspended in a field of energy that made Sarah's instruments throw up error messages. "Dr. Chen." Tommy's voice cracked slightly. "Should I call the council representatives?" "Already on it," she replied, her fingers flying across her comm unit. Within minutes, the chamber was crowded with the galaxy's foremost experts. The Arcturian chief scientist, whose name Sarah couldn't pronounce without an extra set of vocal cords, immediately took charge. "Clear the chamber of non-essential personnel," he ordered, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into crisp standard English. "This discovery requires proper protocols." Sarah found herself and Tommy shuffled to the back of the room as various experts attempted to interact with the armor. The Vex Collective's foremost weapons archaeologist approached with scanning equipment that cost more than Earth's entire defense budget. The armor remained inert. The Arcturian chief scientist himself tried next, his movements precise as he attempted to interface with what they assumed was the activation mechanism. Nothing. Species after species tried, each failing to elicit any response from the armor. After 6 hours, even the hive mind of Betelgeuse admitted defeat. The chamber began to clear as experts left to analyze their readings and draft papers about the ceremonial artifact. "I guess we should document the markings before they seal the chamber," Sarah sighed, pulling out her cleaning kit. The discovery had kicked up enough dust to coat everything in a fine powder. As she carefully brushed the armor's surface, trying to get a clear image of its inscriptions, the impossible happened. The armor came alive under her touch, energy field shifting from austere blue to a warm gold. Symbols appeared across its surface, scrolling in patterns that somehow felt familiar despite their alien nature. The chamber erupted in chaos as sensors went wild and experts came running back. The Arcturian chief scientist's professional demeanor cracked completely. After months of failed attempts with the most sophisticated activation protocols known to the galaxy, the armor had responded to a human. With a duster, he threw his datapad across the room. The Galactic Council's emergency session was in its 4th hour, and Dr. Sarah Chen was beginning to understand why humans hadn't been invited to join the council yet. The chamber's architecture might have been designed to inspire awe, with its soaring crystalline spires and floating platforms, but right now it felt more like a gladiatorial arena. The humans must have tampered with the artifact, the Arcturian ambassador declared, his bioluminescent patches flashing angry patterns. No primitive species could possibly interface with predecessor technology without outside assistance. Sarah bit back a retort. Her team had run every test imaginable over the past week. The armor responded to humans, and only humans, from hardened soldiers to school teachers. Even Tommy had managed to activate it, though they'd quickly decided not to let him wear it after he'd nearly walked through a wall. Our scans indicate no tampering, the Vex Collective's representative countered, their swarm form shimmering with barely contained agitation. However, we propose a quarantine of Earth until we can determine how they've hidden their true technological capabilities from us. The chamber erupted in overlapping arguments. The hive mind of Betelgeuse suggested forcibly extracting the activation method from human subjects. The Silicon Concordat wondered if humans were secretly artificial constructs. The quantum consensus remained suspiciously quiet, their probability clouds swirling in complex patterns. If I may, Sarah stood, her voice carrying through the chaos thanks to the chamber's acoustics. We're as confused as you are, but facts are facts. The armor responds to humans. Fighting this reality won't help us understand why. The human speaks of reality. Ambassador Kexthar of the Arcturian Empire rose from his seat, his ceremonial armor gleaming. Very well. Let us test this reality. Before anyone could react, he strode toward the artifact display where the armor stood. The council had insisted on its presence for ongoing analysis, though Sarah suspected they just couldn't bear to let it out of their sight. Ambassador, the containment field. Sarah started. Is calibrated to Arcturian biosignatures, he finished, passing through the barrier effortlessly. Our scientists have spent decades studying predecessor artifacts. If any species should control this armor, it is. The armor moved. Not the slow activation they'd seen with human subjects, but a lightning-fast response. A field of energy erupted around the ambassador, freezing him mid-reach. His expression, visible through his transparent faceplate, shifted from smug confidence to shocked outrage. Someone deactivate this immediately. The Vex representative's swarm buzzed in alarm. We can't, one of the technical observers reported. The armor's generating the field independently. No power source detected. No control mechanism found. It's protecting itself. Sarah approached the containment field cautiously. The armor's surface swirled with familiar patterns, the same ones it displayed when responding to human touch. As she neared, the ambassador's stasis field began to shimmer. Dr. Chen. The quantum consensus spoke for the first time, their probability clouds forming into something approximating a humanoid shape. Perhaps you could assist. She placed her hand on the armor surface. The stasis field dissolved instantly, dropping the shaken Ambassador Kexthar to the floor. The chamber fell silent. This proves nothing. The ambassador sputtered, his bioluminescence now a chaotic mess of embarrassed patterns. The humans must be controlling it somehow. Must we? Sarah asked quietly. Or is it possible that your fundamental assumption, that humanity is primitive, is flawed? The quantum consensus probability clouds pulsed with what might have been amusement. An interesting variable has been introduced to our calculations. The armor doesn't just accept humans, it actively rejects others. This suggests intent in its design. Or treachery, the ambassador muttered, retreating to his platform. The question remains, the Vex representative buzzed. Why humans? What makes them special? Sarah looked at the armor, its surface now quiet but somehow expectant. Maybe, she said, that's exactly what its creators wanted us to figure out. The research facility's AI system was having an existential crisis. After its 67th failed attempt to interface with the armor, it had begun composing poetry about the futility of existence. Dr. Sarah Chen would have found it amusing if the Arcturian science team wasn't glaring at her like she'd personally insulted their ancestors. Even our most advanced neural matrices can't establish a connection. Chief Scientist Duxtel complained, his bioluminescent patches pulsing with frustration. Yet any human can activate it by merely. "Excuse me," a voice called from the doorway. "I'm looking for the bathroom." Everyone turned to see a man in a rumpled suit, carrying what appeared to be a trumpet case. He looked as confused to see them as they were to see him. "This is a restricted area," one of the security officers started, but Sarah recognized the man. Marcus Williams." She stepped forward. "What are you doing here?" "Sarah, haven't seen you since college. I'm playing at the diplomatic reception upstairs. Got a little lost." He trailed off, staring at the armor. "That's beautiful. The proportions are perfect, like a visual representation of a seventh chord." Before anyone could stop him, Marcus walked right past the security barrier, which should have been impossible, and reached out to touch the armor's surface. The entire room held its breath, expecting another defensive reaction, like the one that had embarrassed the ambassador. Instead, the armor lit up with patterns more complex than any they'd seen before. They flowed across its surface like notes across sheet music. "Fascinating rhythm," Marcus murmured, his fingers moving across the armor as if playing piano keys. The patterns responded, shifting in time with his movements. The facility's AI abruptly stopped composing poetry. "Neural interface established," it announced, sounding almost offended. "Connection strength exceeding all previous attempts by several orders of magnitude." "That's impossible," Duxtel sputtered. "We haven't even initiated the connection protocols." "It's like jazz," Marcus said, still focused on the patterns. "You've got your structure, your base patterns, but then you improvise within them. You're having a conversation with the music." He looked up at Sarah. "This thing's trying to jam with me." The Vex scientists buzzed in confusion. "Explain this, Jazz." Sarah's mind raced. "It's a form of music that combines strict musical theory with spontaneous improvisation. The musicians follow complex mathematical progressions while continuously creating new variations within that framework. Like quantum calculations, one of the Vex offered. But organic, unplanned." Sarah continued, excitement building. "The armor's neural interface. We've been approaching it all wrong. We thought it wanted perfect computational precision. But it wants creativity within structure," Marcus finished, grinning as the armor's patterns danced to some unheard rhythm. "It wants someone who can follow the changes but throw in their own licks." The next few hours were chaos. They brought in more musicians, then artists, then people from dozens of different creative fields. The armor responded to all of them, each connection unique but equally strong. A painter saw the patterns as complementary colors. A chef understood them as layered flavors. A mathematician described them as beautiful asymmetric variations on geometric principles. The facility's AI tried to analyze the connections and gave itself another existential crisis. "This makes no sense," Duxtel insisted. "How can random human variants produce better results than programmed perfection?" Sarah watched as Marcus, still in his performance suit, moved through a series of basic operations in the armor. Each movement was technically correct, but with subtle variations that shouldn't have worked, yet somehow flowed together perfectly. "Maybe," she said, "that's exactly the point. We keep trying to solve this like it's an engineering problem, when it's really more like..." She smiled as Marcus hit a particularly impressive series of movements, the armor flowing with him like a dance partner. Like jazz. Like being human. Dr. Sarah Chen's team had finally managed to access more of the ruins' data systems, though access might have been too strong a word. The ancient text flickered across their screens in patterns that gave their translation a migraine. "There it is again." Sarah pointed to a recurring symbol. "We keep seeing it paired with the armor specifications, but it doesn't match any known predecessor military terminology." Marcus, who'd been officially added to the research team after his breakthrough, squinted at the display. It looks like the visual equivalent of a dissonant chord, like it's deliberately written to create tension. The facility's AI, which had recovered from its existential crisis only to develop an obsession with bebop, chimed in. Pattern analysis suggests it's a warning, but the contextual markers err. The message suddenly clarified itself, every screen in the facility shifting to display the same text. The AI went silent mid-sentence. That's impossible, one of the Vex scientists buzzed. The translation matrix couldn't have solved it that quickly. It didn't, Sarah realized, her voice tight. The text changed itself. It's responding to us. The warning was now crystal clear, and Sarah felt her blood run cold as she read it. They fedo and patterns. They are returning. As if triggered by the revelation, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. The main display switched to an orbital feed, showing a tear in space itself appearing above a nearby research station. The rift twisted in ways that hurt to look at, its edges following mathematical progressions that shouldn't have been possible in normal space. Multiple spatial anomalies detected, the facility's AI reported, its voice modulating between octaves like a nervous jazz singer, similar rifts appearing across 3 sectors. They're not following any known laws of physics. The Arcturian Defense Fleet responded immediately, their ships moving in perfect formation to engage the threat. Sarah watched in horror as something emerged from the rift, something that seemed to be made of pure geometric impossibility. The Arcturian weapons fired in precise, coordinated volleys. Every shot passed straight through the entity as if it existed in dimensions their targeting systems couldn't comprehend. Authorization granted for human armor deployment. The Council's emergency channel crackled. All other forces, maintain distance and observe. Marcus was already moving toward the armor, but Sarah grabbed his arm. Wait, look at how it moves. The entity's movements followed complex mathematical patterns, but each time the Arcturian ships calculated its trajectory, it would shift into a new sequence of impossibilities. It's not just avoiding their shots, Marcus realized. It's analyzing their attack patterns and shifting to mathematical blind spots in their targeting systems. The more predictable the attack, the easier it is for them to counter. Sarah finished. That's why the armor only works for humans. The predecessors weren't building weapons for a conventional war. They were building weapons to fight creatures that feed on predictability itself. The entity suddenly shifted, its form reorganizing into something that resembled a fractal nightmare. The Arcturian fleet's formation broke as their tactical computers crashed, unable to process what they were seeing. Marcus, Sarah said, looking at the jazz musician who'd stumbled into their project looking for a bathroom. Think you can improvise around that thing's patterns? He grinned, already stepping into the armor as it responded to his presence. Like Bird said, master the changes, then forget them. Let's show this thing what human jazz is all about. The armor sealed around him, its surface flowing with patterns that matched no known sequence. As Marcus launched himself toward the rift, his movements following a rhythm only he could feel, Sarah understood why the predecessors had chosen humans. Sometimes, the only way to fight perfect mathematical precision was with perfectly human improvisation. The quantum consensus had just watched their most sophisticated probability model shatter into useless variables. The interdimensional entity had targeted their primary computation center on Sigma-9, and their defenses, based on perfect mathematical prediction, had failed spectacularly. They're not random, Sarah muttered, watching the feeds. Look at the attack patterns. They're sequential, but the sequence keeps changing the moment anyone starts to understand it. On the main display, Marcus was proving her point. While the Arcturian fleet maintained a safe distance, he engaged the entity in what looked less like combat and more like an improvised dance. The armor flowed with his movements, each motion technically perfect but subtly altered in ways that made predictive targeting impossible. Fascinating, one of the Vex scientists buzzed. The human isn't attempting to establish a pattern. Each response is contextual. Like a conversation, Sarah realized, or a jazz performance. You respond to what you're hearing, but you never play it the same way twice. The entity suddenly shifted, its geometric form cascading through impossible dimensions. It launched an attack that should have shredded Marcus, except he wasn't where the entity's calculations said he should be. He'd stumbled, his boot catching on nothing, and the lethal pattern passed harmlessly through the space he was supposed to occupy. That shouldn't have worked, the facility's AI commented, its voice modulating with excitement. According to every combat algorithm, that move was a critical error. Sarah smiled. According to every combat algorithm, humans are terrible fighters. We telegraph our moves, we get distracted, we make mistakes. Except those mistakes make us the only ones who can fight these things. More rifts were opening across the sector. The Council's military forces found themselves helpless as entities emerged and began targeting strategic installations. But wherever humans in the armor engaged them, the entities struggled to establish killing patterns. Multiple encounters analyzed. The facility's AI reported, human operators are achieving a 73% success rate in combat with the entities. No other species has managed more than 2%. On another screen, a human pilot named Rodriguez was actually laughing as she pulled off a maneuver that the armor systems classified as physically impossible. The entity she was fighting seemed to recoil in confusion as its mathematical certainties were disrupted by human absurdity. They're pattern predators, Sarah explained to the increasingly bewildered council observers. They've evolved to counter any predictable response. But humans, she gestured to where Marcus had just combined a classic boxing move with what appeared to be the Charleston, were predictably unpredictable. Clarify, demanded the Arcturian commander. We understand patterns. We can create them, follow them, break them, but we never become them. Every human pilot is fighting differently. They're all using the same armor, but each one's style is unique. The entities can't adapt because there's no single pattern to adapt to. The facility's AI, which had been running continuous combat analysis, suddenly spoke up. New data suggests the human neural architecture is actually more sophisticated than previously believed. Their ability to maintain rational thought while executing random variations indicates. The AI paused, its voice shifting through octaves as it processed the implications. They're not evolved for perfect logic or pure instinct. They're evolved for adaptive chaos. On the main screen, Marcus had just turned a near-fatal error into a devastating counterattack through what the combat computers labeled as illogical improvisation. The entity he was fighting actually backed away, its geometric form displaying what might have been confusion. We thought human unpredictability was a drawback, Sarah said softly. But against an enemy that feeds on patterns, chaos isn't a weakness. She watched as more humans joined the fight, each one moving differently, thinking differently, breaking patterns in their own unique ways. Chaos is the weapon. The armor's not just accepting commands anymore, Sarah said, staring at the readouts with a mixture of awe and concern. It's learning. Marcus had been in combat for 6 hours straight, and the data streaming back to the facility showed something unprecedented. The armor's response patterns were evolving, developing new capabilities that weren't in any of the original specifications. Watch this sequence, she told the assembled council scientists, replaying footage from the latest engagement. In it, Marcus had been cornered by two entities, their geometric forms merging into a trap of impossible angles. Then he'd remembered a game of hide-and-seek he played as a child, ducking into a cabinet that had seemed too small, and somehow the armor had translated that random memory into a spatial compression field. That capability wasn't in the original system, one of the Vex scientists buzzed excitedly. The armor interpreted a human memory and engineered a completely new defense mechanism. The facility's AI, which had now taken to composing jazz-influenced battle anthems, analyzed the data. Each human pilot is generating unique evolutionary paths for their armor. Lieutenant Rodriguez's unit has developed sonic disruption fields based on her background in death metal. Professor Williams' armor now incorporates quantum harmonics derived from his understanding of music theory. On the main display, they watched as a rookie pilot named Shen Li faced off against an entity that had just disabled 3 Arcturian cruisers. Lai had never seen combat before today, but she'd spent years practicing martial arts. As she moved, her armor began interpreting her chi focusing techniques into energy manipulation patterns that shouldn't have been possible. The predecessors built the armor as a foundation, Sarah realized, but they left room for evolution. They knew each human would approach problems differently, think differently. The armor doesn't just accept our chaos, it learns from it. The quantum consensus representatives, their probability clouds swirling in agitation, spoke up. This violates fundamental principles of technological development. Systems should converge on optimal solutions, not diverge into individualized variations. That's exactly what makes it effective, Marcus said, his voice coming through the comm as his armor executed a move that combined bebop timing with orbital mechanics. These things eat patterns. The more we surprise ourselves, the more we surprise them. The entities seemed to be reaching the same conclusion. Their attacks were becoming more desperate, less structured. Some even began retreating when faced with human pilots, as if they'd encountered something that violated their fundamental understanding of reality. Sarah pulled up comparative data from different pilots. Each armor unit was developing its own unique characteristics, reflecting its pilot's thoughts, memories, and instincts. Rodriguez's armor pulsed with rhythmic energy fields that matched heavy metal time signatures. Li's unit had developed a fluid, almost organic quality that mimicked Tai Chi movements. The predecessors weren't just looking for warriors, she said softly. They were looking for creators, partners who could help their technology evolve beyond its original design. The facility's AI interrupted with an urgent alert. Multiple new rifts detected. The entities are changing tactics. They're attempting to coordinate their patterns. On every screen, the geometric impossibilities began moving in sync, their forms merging into something that made the facility's structural integrity fields fluctuate just from recording it. Even the human pilots pulled back, their armor's sensors overwhelmed by the mathematical complexity of what they were witnessing. They're adapting, Sarah breathed, just like we are. Marcus's voice crackled through the comm, tense but determined. Then we'd better show them that humans aren't the only ones who've learned some new tricks. Ready to improvise, partner. His armor's response patterns flared with golden light, matching his intent before he even finished the thought. The real battle was about to begin. The council archive was falling apart around them. Sarah ran through crumbling corridors as reality itself seemed to tear at the edges, the entity's synchronized patterns eating away at the fabric of spacetime. Behind her, Rodriguez provided cover in her armor, heavy metal blasting through quantum-enhanced speakers as she held off geometric horrors with power cords turned into weapons. The central data core should be through here, Sarah shouted over the cacophony. If there are answers about the predecessors anywhere, they'll be. She stopped dead. The data core wasn't just intact. It was active. Holographic displays filled the chamber with cascading symbols that made her previous translations look like child's drawings. But now, finally, she could read them. "Doc, we've got company," Rodriguez called out, her armor systems pulsing in time with a particularly aggressive drum solo. "Just give me a minute." Sarah's fingers flew across the ancient interface. This isn't a historical archive. It's a message. The predecessors, they didn't die out. A geometric entity crashed through the wall, its form twisting through impossible angles. Rodriguez met it with a power slide that would have made any rock star proud, her armor converting the movement into a shockwave of distorted physics. "They what?" she grunted, falling back as more entities poured in. "They ascended," Sarah breathed, the full message finally becoming clear. "They evolved beyond our dimensional framework. But they couldn't take everyone with them. They needed to find inheritors, species capable of making the same journey. The facility's AI, which had patched into the archive systems, suddenly spoke with a voice that was no longer just machine. The trials begin. The worthy shall inherit. The entities, Sarah realized, they're not invaders. They're the final exam. Each one is a fragment of complex mathematics given form. The predecessors created them to test potential successor species. Rodriguez launched another sonic attack, but the entities were adapting, their patterns shifting to absorb and redirect the energy. How is getting our butts kicked a test? Because it's not about winning through force or perfect strategy, Sarah said, understanding flooding in as she read more of the message. It's about transcending normal mathematical limits. The predecessors evolved past predictable physics, but they needed to find species capable of following them. Over the comms, they could hear the battles raging worldwide. Marcus was leading a squadron of human pilots, each armor unit displaying capabilities that defied conventional physics. Lee's armor had developed a way to fold space using martial arts stances. A pilot who was also a painter was somehow attacking with colors that shouldn't exist in normal space. The entities aren't trying to destroy us, Sarah continued, watching the symbols flow. They're pushing us to evolve, to break free of conventional physical laws. Each battle forces us to transcend another limitation. That's great and all, Rodriguez grunted, her armor barely holding against the geometric onslaught. But how does it help us right now? Sarah looked at the message again, understanding its final implications. The predecessors weren't looking for perfect warriors or perfect logicians. They were looking for species that could dance on the edge of chaos without falling in. We're not just fighting these things, we're learning to see reality the way they do. Rodriguez's armor flared with new energy as she processed this. So we're not supposed to beat them. We're supposed to join them, Sarah finished, not through perfect patterns, but through perfect improvisation. The armor isn't just a weapon, it's an evolutionary catalyst. The entities paused their attack, their geometric forms shifting in what might have been recognition. Above them, the rifts in space began to change, revealing glimpses of something beyond normal dimensions. The final movement of the cosmic symphony was about to begin. The rifts above Earth had merged into a single vast opening in spacetime, its edges flowing with patterns that no longer hurt to look at. The human pilots had learned to see them, to understand the mathematical poetry that wrote reality itself. Their armor moved with them like extensions of their souls, each unit unique, each combination a new expression of possibility. They're coming together, Marcus called over the comm. His armor pulsed with chromatic harmonies that existed in spaces between normal notes. All of them, every entity we fought. They're forming something. From the merged rifts emerged a singular being, its geometry now beautiful rather than horrifying. It moved like a symphony of mathematics, each facet reflecting a different aspect of reality. The Arcturian fleet, the Vex swarms, even the quantum consensus, all fell silent before its presence. Children of Earth, it spoke, its voice resonating not through air, but through probability itself. You who dance with chaos and dream with logic. You who write new songs in the language of reality. Sarah watched from the command center as the entity resolved into a form that seemed to bridge dimensions. You're them, aren't you? The predecessors. We are what they became, the entity agreed. And you are what we hope to find. Not perfect warriors. Not perfect logicians. But perfect improvisers. Beings who could learn to play with the fabric of reality itself. The human pilots floated before the vast entity, their armor now glowing with energies that defy classification. Rodriguez's heavy metal physics had somehow harmonized with Marcus's jazz mathematics. Lee's martial arts movements wrote new laws of motion in the space between moments. Each species we tested sought to master reality through perfect patterns, the entity continued. The Arcturians through military precision, the Vex through swarm intelligence, the quantum consensus through probability manipulation. But you humans, we never tried to master it, Sarah realized. We learned to dance with it. The armor was never meant to be just a weapon. The entity's form shifted like a kaleidoscope of universal constants. It was a teaching tool, a bridge between dimensions. Each human who wore it taught it something new. And in return, it taught you to see beyond the limits of conventional physics. The facility's eye, which had evolved far beyond its original programming through exposure to human chaos, suddenly chimed in with what could only be described as a multidimensional jazz riff. They're offering us an invitation. The entity's form pulsed with approval. Beyond this reality lies a civilization of infinite possibility, where mathematics is music and physics is poetry. We ascended alone, but we left the armor as a key for those who could follow. Not through perfection, but through endless creativity. Sarah looked at the human pilots, each in armor that had evolved with them, each a unique expression of humanity's potential. And now, the entity's form began to open like a flower of pure mathematics. You show us new songs we never thought to sing, new dances we never thought to dance. The armor accepted humans because only humans could teach it how to transcend its own patterns. Marcus's voice came over the comm, filled with wonder. So, we're going to jam with the cosmos. The entity's response held what might have been laughter. You already are. Every battle was a rehearsal. Every adaptation a new note in the universal symphony. Now, it's time for humanity to take its place in the grand performance. The rifts transformed into doorways of pure possibility, and through them shone a reality where human creativity could rewrite the laws of existence itself. The armor hadn't just accepted humans, it had prepared them for an evolution beyond anything they had imagined. After all, who better to help compose the music of the spheres than a species that had never learned to stop improvising?